Hi, and welcome back to Elja's World of Wonder. And today I want to talk about why individuals and organizations need to understand what is sustainable resilience, how to read and interpret systems, and how to measure impact so that we can survive and succeed in this changing world. Uh, in today's highly uncertain and ever changing world, understanding both what is resilience not only individual level but also on this organizational systemic level, I think is more important than ever. So concepts like measuring our impact and anticipating future scenarios of what's to come are both organizational and human capabilities that I think we need more than ever before. And understanding how we can anticipate risks and disruptive changes while at the same time building abilities so that we can recover from them are crucial so that we can build more future proof solutions as well as strategic and human capabilities. And based on my experience, I truly believe that this growing uncertainty and complexity of both the business world and our everyday lives demand new ways of approaching value creation. How do we understand risks and impacts, and also how do we approach problem solving? So, we all know that we live in this information overload, all those dopamine sucking algorithms of social media is trying to take our attention away and making it scattered, and many other disruptions going on, like increased amount of cyber attacks, high economic uncertainty and market volatility in general, and of course, not to forget the effects of climate change. But I handle climate change related things in another video. But anyways, like building these new solutions capabilities, they require us that we really question what is business as usual and looking beyond these easy to digest narratives that we are used to. So I think now it's more than ever a superpower to be able to focus, to filter out information like what's relevant to our context and what is not. So turning off this lizard brain, which tells us to act and act and act primitively, and actually probe, sense, and observe what solutions will emerge from complexity and chaos that we face almost on a daily basis. And I think that very few leaders, experts, organizations in general really understand what's the nature of the problems, what's the context of the challenge they are dealing with, which leads to wasted resources and using non-matching tools and approaches that don't really reach the desired state of growth or development in more individual context. So this is where understanding the level of complexity and uncertainty of decisions and actions we deal with plays a big part. And actually, I'm very excited to say that this is the topic I will research further in my master's thesis, and also this big idea here what I'm talking about today. Mm, and what I often find crazy in the business world, that also in the way that people consume information, is that everybody expects business as usual and one size fits all solutions, while we are facing increasing complexity of the modern world. It doesn't make sense, and most importantly, it's impractical if we actually want to solve real life problems. Uh, and actually, this is also one aspect to my master's thesis, like applying different data, machine learning, and system analysis methods to Sinafin sense frame making framework. So I told about this already in earlier video. So the point is that this framework identifies problems in simple, complicated, complex, or chaos domains, and the ones that are not categorized are in the domain of disorder. So what Sinafin model has made me realize is that most of people deal with problems as if they were in simple and obvious categories. So we expect like clear cause and effect relations and predictability based on analyzing what happened. And yeah, I mean, of course, that's how our brains work. We want some certainty on things, some predictability, uh, but it's just not how world works. World is not linear. World is mostly chaotic, and in reality, like if you stop to probe, sense, and observe, you realize that very few things are obvious by nature. And of course, to be realistic, like many of the daily situations won't give us the time and space to really observe like what's the real complexity and uncertainty of everything. But let's say that I think already acknowledging complexity, like acknowledging these factors along goes a long way, because it helps us to filter out important information and inputs that is useful to our use case and relevant to the specific context that we are in. And honestly, just stop and think about how important it is to both like that we internalize and utilize most beneficial information for our context in this mad complexity that we are in. It's like a superpower. We just need to digest a lot of information, put a context on it, this is relevant, and then go forward. And but before we go further on the topic of today, is that I just want to open up my context on this, like why am I anyone to talk about these things? Well, well, I have nearly a decade of experience. I've been across private and public sector in various organizations in positions related to technology and sustainability, as well as in my early adulthood. I've experienced my father's death, startup bankruptcy, and big bunch of other personal setbacks that a under 30-year-old simply should not go through. And yeah, also I've always been someone who really embraces uncertainty and change. So when context change, I have very much relied always on my ability to adapt, learn new things, and embrace uncertainty, so that I'm not taking single day for granted. And yeah, I would say those factors make me qualified to talk about these things. What I wanted to break down more in detail is that how sustainability, understanding systems, and resilience are actually all related to each other, and why I think that they just simply should work hand in hand for most optimal outcomes for change and impact. So, as I explained, in this growing uncertainty and complexity of the world, we really need to dive deep. We really need to sense the changing context and understand the nature and characteristics of the problem we are dealing with, and also who are all the entities and stakeholders around the problem, whether it's through data analysis or acquiring knowledge insights from the experts who are around the problems and dealing with it. And by that, we can choose the best objectives, actions, and metrics to work towards a solution or solving the challenge. So, but in parallel, like organizations and individuals need to remain action driven. We need to be resilient and we need to be agile when we deal with changing, whether it's economic context, environmental, or social context. So, what I call actually sort of embodiment of thriving in change and uncertainty is what we Finnish people call sisu. And it's an extraordinary determination in face of extreme challenges and courage that is represented in situations where success is hard to achieve. So, like for example, the set and setting we were in the Second World War against outnumbered Russian troops, or Ukraine against Russia right now. I'm not going further. Then this is not a political channel, but I guess you got the point. So you can also, even though I'm more interested of the systemic resilience, the resilience in a broader context is usually discussed as an individual's ability. Uh, but especially, I want to emphasize the ability to recover, because it's not only about withstanding shocks. Uh, the most sustainable outcomes come when we also think about how whether it's an organization or individual, how what are the practicalities, the actions, and the mindset, how they are going to recover. And I would say even that's more important in many of situations. But what actually is resilience? I mean, like I said, it's not only about our ability to withstand a shock, but it's also about being able to recover from it as efficiently as possible and thrive after that. And that's where understanding sustainability comes in, because it's simply about how we use our resources today so that we are not causing significant harm for future generation or in our like personal life to our future development paths where we want to be in life. So one of the key lessons many individuals and organizations are going through right now is learning how to use resources more smartly and not so wastefully. And also when talking about sign-off-in framework, I think it's really helpful. Like you shouldn't be applying, let's say, complex neural networks to a really simple problem. It's not resource efficient, and many other examples. But the thing is that, like I told before, the problem often is that we think that all problems are simple and obvious, while it's, I would say that it's almost the opposite. Like most of the problems are complex if we really understand them. Mm, but yeah, anticipate. But we also talk about anticipating risks and disruptive changes. They are also really important aspects to sustainability, as it helps us to prepare and build capabilities to thrive and survive in those future scenarios. And of course, in practical everyday life and business, it might be way too idealistic to actually reap the benefits of all of these aspects, but at least we have an ideal state of development in our minds. And most importantly, we make incremental, systematic, this sort of micro learning based progress every day to get there. And that's the most important thing. And that's the whole core of this, what we call agile lean development. So that's the often the best we can do. And I think that sustainability and resilience, they are just two sides of the same coin, and their attributes are at their best when combined. Like sustainability defines like how we do things sustainably. And uh, and then like resilience is the actual ability of like how do we withstand shock, and how do we recover and succeed after that. And like to recap, like together they refer to the ability of an organization or an individual to bounce back from adversity and continue to thrive, while we are also mindful of the long-term sustainability of how resources are used and how the so-called like systemic whole is affected. And talking about systems, like my specific interest, like I mentioned in my master's thesis, is not really resilience referring to individual, because I think that's quite a lot discussed topic, but rather what I call systemic resilience of the whole company, for example. But what about the recovery itself, and not forgetting what I call navigating and taking action in uncertainty and complexity? Next, we go there. To open this up and go to the last big topic of today, and I'll go now more on the level of how of doing things. So, how understanding data driven decision making, measuring impact, and acting in agile ways contributes to our ability so that we can both recover and succeed in these disruptive change scenarios. So, I'm not going to go deeper into opening this concept in this video, but in a nutshell, the context here is that with data-driven decision making, I refer to the tendency where we want to reduce uncertainty of making decisions, whether it's by collecting hard data or analyzing insights or gathering knowledge of the people who are or from the entities who are around the problem. And with agility, I refer to this iterative approach of working by taking small and incremental steps to understand and navigate in a situation instead of first like heavily planning and preparing, which often, not always, but often leads to wasted resources because we are over preparing for something that's not going to happen. And yeah, we just get stuck, especially many experts, they get stuck in this perfectionism, which is just not really there, because we have to interact with the real world to make our solutions and ideas work. And especially during these times of high uncertainty and chaos, and especially in chaos, sign-off-in model tells us first to act to stabilize the situation. So we could say that the messier things get, more important is to be able to act, and of course preferably so that it happens in efficient and meaningful way to our context we are in. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, I think organizations and individuals, we are not just supposed to like survive and recover from big disruptions, but we also want to understand how effective we are and what's the impact of these decisions we made or actions we've taken. So therefore, like assessing and measuring impact, I think it's just key to understanding the effectiveness of the changes made, and also allows us as individuals and as organizations to reflect on what we've done and what have been the outcomes. Okay, time to wrap things up. So let's stop and reflect shortly. Why it's actually important for organizations and individuals to understand these concepts that we discussed today. So first of all, we talk about the approach of sustainable resilience, sustainability, referring to how we do things. So we anticipate long-term outcomes, we save resources, we are resource efficient, and resilience. When we talk about resilience, we don't talk only about withstanding a shock and creating this picture of a superhuman, but rather we think about more how we can reflect, how we can measure progress, so we can not only withstand the shock but also sustainably recover from those situations and then start to succeed again in the changing circumstances. We also talk about the importance of data-driven decision making so that we can position our challenge in the sign-off-in framework, but not only that, but when thinking of how to navigate in the complex or chaotic situations, we need to stay agile, so we take small incremental steps towards the progress. But on the other hand, we don't know where we are going, so if we don't measure impact or in general just the effectiveness of the decisions and and anticipating the outcomes of actions that we make. And I guess, and I hope that most of us agree that, since we are facing these many unprecedented array of global challenges, from climate change to full-blown wars to the general high political and economic instability, and I would argue that all of you are one way or another directly or indirectly affected by these crises. And those organizations and individuals who are able to adapt and respond quickly while also being mindful of their long-term impact will be better positioned to succeed in the face of these challenges. But we also, like we discussed, it's not just about anticipating risks and impact and disruptive changes, but actually how do we efficiently recover from those and continuously improve by staying agile and measuring our impact and progress. And I would argue that if we have these tools and methods in mind, we can build a more sustainable and resilient future, not only for ourselves, but also create this sort of positive reinforcing effect to the ecosystem, to our organization, or whichever stakeholders are surrounding us. And additionally, consumers, public sector stakeholders, investors are increasingly demanding that companies act in more socially and environmentally responsible way. And based on all this, I argue that if companies really understand what is sustainable resilience, how they measure impact, how they combine the best of agile, lean ways of working, it's not only about meeting the demands on paper, but also to gain competitive advantage, improve resilience and agility through more sustainable performance. And finally, like what I said, we have to measure and assess also the impact, so we can also and the companies can anticipate what are the mid and long-term outcomes of their decisions and actions and do that better. So yeah, thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe. It was really a pleasure to make this video.